what is the conservative position on
Ah,
homosexuality?
I, I don't
It's
know
a
that there
sin, I
necessarily
guess.
is one.
Well, I mean,
Well, that would be the argument if you were, I'm trying to think of how to put it. If you were really just testing the Christian position, and actually it's not even, I don't even think it's that anymore.
well, and I guess that's part of it is like where does, given that conservatism in this country is largely based around Christianity, um, it's sort of the what is sort of the appropriate, like how should you deal with homosexuality? Like what is the appropriate response given how much we have seen that we have clearly gone too far with the LGBTQ stuff. Like that has gone too far. So how far back do we have to go? And a lot of people are pointing out that I mean, like you could say, oh, it's just the T and the Q, but if you look at it and you look at like Pride Parade, you go back years and it was always very debaucherous.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things that was an argument from conservatives for decades as far as this being a slippery slope whenever you start opening things up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, everybody said, no, no, that's not the case. That's never going to happen, blah, blah, blah. And what we're seeing play out in real time is that that absolutely is the case, is that's exactly what's happened. It's gone just I mean, you talk about, yeah, pride parades. Sure, we had a pride parade, or I said we, like the country, there was a pride parade in the country in what, San Francisco?
Yeah.
Okay, where else? Like you didn't see them across the country, just in certain locales, right?
Yeah, I mean they're everywhere now. They used to be
And
like San Francisco, and then I think New
right,
York, and then I think Chicago and Seattle, and
and now you're small town America,
now it's everywhere. Like
right?
everybody's
Like,
going to have a pride parade.
right.
Um, and I mean I think it's just run away. It hasn't, and it's clearly a problem. Like you got the sexualizing of kids just everywhere around this stuff. Like if you say stay away from our kids and stop sexualizing, they call you a bigot
Right.
because they know they need to get to your kids in order to get whatever it is they want, and so which I can only assume is more sexualization and debauchery.
I mean, like, there's an argument to be made that, you know, they don't have kids, so they have yours, right?
Right. That
And
doesn't
so
make
it's preparing from a very young age, also known as grooming,
right.
that to make this normalized for everybody to just say, yeah, okay, we do this. This is a thing. It's okay to do. And like I don't agree with that, but
I mean, but I think at the very least, if they're not pedophiles, they are the vanguard for pedophiles.
yeah, I'm not sure what else you would call them other than pedophiles, to be honest. I mean,
Well,
who else wants
pederasts, technically, because it's
who?
erotic love, not philic love. Anyway,
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So we can argue over semantics, but I mean, like the reality is why do you want to talk to children about sexuality and sexual stuff? That just doesn't, I mean, like conservatives don't talk to children about that kind of stuff. Like that's not a thing,
well,
right?
I think the reality is it's because they're perverted. They're because literally they're perverted. Their way they look at the world is against the natural order. So in order to change it, they need to intervene. So their argument, I think, is that they need to get them young so that they could explain this stuff to them before normalcy works its way into them. So they need to intervene and show them the queer lifestyle before they adopt a normal lifestyle, basically.
Sure. And I can see that argument. But I would say trying to think of how to put this. I don't know that that there's a good answer there, or that I have the right answer. I would say that a lot of it has to do with, you know, catching them young. It allows you to imbue them with your worldview rather than their parents. Because let's be real, children spend like you see this whenever you see teachers in the class that are teaching
Right.
this kind of stuff. They spend way more time as a general rule with their teachers than they do with their parents. And
Yeah.
that's a fault of the parents, right? That is a fault
Oh,
of
sure.
conservative, like, and you see it, I mean, across the board. Yeah, and I would say that as a general rule across, most of conservatism, most people have zero problems with the homosexuality aspect. Like they're like, look, what two adults do behind closed doors is not my business, and they don't want to get involved, and they don't think that it's okay to get involved, and so they just go, no, it is what it is, right?
Hmm.
Um, and it's a lot of like, you do you, but just like I don't want you, spreading your information to my kids. Like I don't want
Right.
you talking to my kids about it.
If you want to
But
teach my kids math and only
but what
math, that's fine.
what
But
adults do is like, it's none of my business, right?
sure.
And I think that's where the major pushback that we've seen lately is coming from. Is it's
Sure.
whenever it's pushing to kids,
Oh, absolutely.
and I don't know that it has anything to do with the uh, you know just the trans deal or anything like that. I think it's across the board, um, and it may actually stem back to uh, COVID and what was going on then, where people started seeing what their kids were learning in schools because they were doing Zoom classes from the home, right? So they're
Sure.
seeing what their kids are being taught. They're seeing what the teachers are saying to them, and that's where you initially saw the pushback was in that.
Right.
And I think it has really woken people up to the fact that, well, shit, maybe I need to be paying more attention to what's going on in my children's world. And so
Sure.
the pushback that you didn't see before, I think that may be why you're seeing it now.
Oh, yeah, that's why you're seeing it now. But I think there's a lot of conservatives are now looking into this and like looking at how this start. Where is the line we need to push back to? Because this has gone too far, and we need to push it back. And we're in unacceptable territory right now. So the question is, how far back do we push it? Because there's some concern that we'll push it all the way back into, you know,
The
the
1950s.
yeah, like smear the queer type shit. Um,
Really, that's
and
just a
it
game. That has nothing to do with anything. Um, no, I mean, like, yeah, there's some. I think there's some valid, you know, concerns about that, right? But the
so
question is like, what do you actually do? How do you approach it, right? And I think a lot of people are going to have to figure out on their own, what do I truly believe, and you
well,
know,
that's
what am I willing to fight for? Because
well, that's
that's going to
kind
be
of
what it's going to be.
well, that's kind of what I'm that's a lot what I'm asking right now. Is like, where is the line basically? Because um, I mean, I look at it like I think gay marriage was a mistake. Now, I totally respect the rights of gay people to like want to visit their partner in the hospital or whatever, but the arguments I've seen that were kind of convincing was basically talking about how when by opening up gay marriage, what you do is you undermine marriage. You just opened it up a lot and you started to assault the foundation of it. And I think the weakening of the institution of marriage has been a disaster in this country.
Sure.
But I,
Well,
I
and the
look at
question then becomes, did the institution of marriage get weakened by opening up to gay marriage, or do you think it got weakened more by the institution of no fault divorce.
Well, I think no fault divorce was far more damaging. Um, but I think we need to strengthen it as much as we can. I think I mean, we've seen that no fault divorce has probably been one of the single most disastrous social changes in this country. At least in my opinion. So while it's like that's dropping a nuclear bomb on the civilization, gay marriage might be dropping a normal bomb. We still shouldn't do it. Um, the
What if
now
you, what if, what do you think? Just a thought subject or a thought experiment is, what do you think things would look like if you left gay marriage in place and just took no fault divorce off the table?
I think it would I think it improve drastically. I think you would see a major aversion back to the norm, but I think over time what you would see is they would hammer at other perversions of marriage so that marriage can be, you know, the you start to expand what can and can't be married. Like, well, okay, why can't it be married to multiple people?
Right?
Why can't multiple people enter into a three-way marriage? Why can't and you just start to expand the concept of marriage. And then I think inevitably what you do is you almost have to bring about some kind of easier divorce to handle that situation. I mean, you don't, but if you don't allow some kind of low fault divorce, let's call it, as a result of that expansion, you'll have. I think politically that's untenable. I think you'll have just people complaining. I don't think you can politically maintain that.
I mean, I would say that it's probably politically distasteful, right? Like it's a difficult thing and they probably won't do it. My argument would be, no, you never lower the case. You want to do a polygamous marriage? Know what decisions you're making and you're free to
Oh,
make
sure.
whatever decision you like, but you're not free from the consequences of those decisions. And you know, that's the reality. And, unfortunately, we live in a society where everybody wants to be, you know, separated from actually having to deal with the consequences of the decisions that they've made. And so that's a problem. But I think you can address that and say, no, you need to make sure that you're choosing better people. You need to make sure that you are picking who you are going to spend the rest of your life with well, because that's the goal. Now, there's
Well, and
also another argument that you could say that you could go to civil unions, right? There's also the option that, you know, I think a lot of people have gotten to the point where they don't want the state involved in marriage at all.
yeah, I mean, and for a while it really wasn't. I was looking at it. This is a while back, and basically, it's my understanding that it wasn't so much the state was the force of was saying that you were married. They were just recognizing something that had already existed, and the
Correct.
practicalities of it. Um, and and in that regard, like for in kind of so I think I don't think you can fully separate the church and state in this regard, so to speak, because I think you kind of have to recognize the combining nature of marriage in a legal aspect of it. I think to not do that would require us first to radically deregulate society. We'd have to just repeal a ton and ton of regulation and laws
Why?
because of how many things are because of how much marriage is entwined in the statutes, basically.
Okay.
And how much it only works because marriage is entwined in the statutes. And if it didn't, then you'd have some significant issues dealing with the concept of marriage within the law. When a married couple goes and enters into something.
Sure. But I mean, like you could argue that it just basically makes most of those laws invalid.
That any
Because if
well,
there's no marriage anymore, if the state's not involved in marriage anymore, and they're not recognizing it, then that
yeah,
means
but
if
that doesn't solve the problem.
what problem? Like let's pick out a specific example if you can.
Okay, so I mean, wasn't expecting here, so I don't have a ton of example. Okay, let's take the hospitals things. So are you now if 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 the laws are no longer say protect the rights of married people to visit spouses in the hospital, can anybody visit the house spot? Can anybody visit you in the hospital, or can
Sorry.
bite me? Um,
No thanks. Not my type. And to answer your question, yes, you know, just about anybody can go visit somebody in the hospital at any time. Like that's a normal thing. I don't know why I know that there probably are circumstances where there are issues with that, but
there's plenty of restriction on visitation rights in hospitals.
uh, accepting COVID without that,
Um, yeah, there's like there is the duration, there's the number of visitors, there's the if the hospital is crowded, I believe they can limit you to direct family.
okay,
Um, there's been various aspects of that.
sure,
There is the outside of visiting hours, I think it's family only or something. So
okay. Well, I mean, like that's, I would call that for the most part kind of inconvenient, but I don't know how,
I'm just not sure what you get by eliminating it, eliminating
like
marriage from state.
if taking the state out of it, you get
Yeah,
a,
entirely.
as a, well, that depends if you're a male or a female. If you're a male, then generally speaking, you get a lot. Like
Right.
it evens the playing field a significant amount. But whenever, but as a female, like probably nothing because you don't, I
Yeah,
mean,
I
like
mean, I think it's.
we know current laws are incentivized for women to leave, right?
I mean,
So,
yeah, I mean, it would be better from. It'd be better than what we currently have, but most things would be better than what we currently have. Like, there's a
well, and
lot of options that be better than what we currently have.
right, and I'm not saying that you're just like, oh, we're going to make it better than we currently have. I mean, to me, you're just undoing something that was done in like the 1970s,
I mean,
60s, whatever,
I
right?
think
Like
that
it's just
sure,
a
well,
reversion.
kind of along that line. I guess what would be what I would think would be better would be the like if you get a Catholic marriage, all right, the rules of divorce are decided by are set up by the Catholic Church basically.
Uh-huh,
And if you got a and so you could choose which marriage contract you want to enter into.
sure. And the problem that
And
you run into is that that only applies to certain religions. And it
okay,
does apply to certain religions in today's world.
right, well, but I'm saying if the state recognizes this and they go, well, it's you entered into a Catholic marriage, you can't get divorced unless you get approval from the church.
Right.
And and
But
so
that's so people have like I agree with you, but I don't like I don't see that happening in today's society because again, we're living in a two-tiered juris, jurisprudence system. Like that's just the reality. There was actually a case in Texas where a couple was married according to Islamic law
right,
and she wanted to get divorced
Islamic law
I
doesn't
don't,
allow it or
and
whatever.
she has no, like, according to Islamic law, as far as I understood this case, is it said, well, she doesn't have a say in that. The only way that there's a divorce is that he agrees to it, and the imam, I think, has to agree to it.
Right.
And so Texas court said, well, sorry, you signed the agreement and you're part of that church. I'm sorry. Now, I don't know if that got overturned on appeal or what, but I mean, like, that should be a clear example that I think we should follow to a certain extent. And again, you you should
I'm sorry,
you
I'm confused. What are
you're
you
gonna
advocating to override Islamic law or
no, I'm saying I want the law to be addressed, like, um to be uh enforced equally. That's all I'm saying. Like, if I get it married in a Catholic church,
Mhm.
then the priest has to approve a divorce, which means you have to prove to the priest that there's a reason that you're going to get divorced. That,
Right,
generally speaking, right?
right.
And that's not the case in today's, like,
Sure.
you go to court right now, they're going to be
Right,
like, no, she can say what she can say she wants to get divorced, and you're going to.
right,
My point is that if in today's world, like, it's different if you're like
right. But we're
the
advocating for a change of today's world, so I'm guessing I'm a little confused.
okay, I guess I'm saying that I don't think you're gonna get that change because they don't care.
Okay, I
You
mean,
don't matter to them, and nor do I.
okay. I guess I don't see how this seems like an easier way thing to get than removing the state from marriage entirely.
I mean, I agree.
And that's
Sure.
kind of my point. Like this seems like that would get everything like that would just fit society would determine itself what's the best marriage contract basically. Because
Right,
people
but I
would
don't.
learn over time that marriage contract sucks. Do not get a Lutheran marriage.
Yeah, I just I mean, like, I'd love that to happen, but
Yeah.
I don't think it will.
No, I mean, like not anytime soon.
I mean,
Um,
when you have actual legal documents that are unenforceable in court, then what's the point? Like,
well, I
that's
mean,
where
that's just
I think we have to fight that shit first.
oh, yes. I mean, like we have a massive legal problem where our legal system is held together by duct tape and bribes. It's we were hoping that there was it was held together by a mutual appreciation for the law, which died probably about 10 years ago. I mean,
Sure.
it certainly died in the last 3 years.
Oh,
Probably died
absolutely.
in probably died in 2016. But
I
the
think it actually probably died long before that.
yeah, I'm inclined to believe that. I think that yeah, it that in of itself is the problem. But I'm wondering like just how far back we need to purge the system of things from a social perspective. Like legally, we need to fix a ton.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, from a social perspective, I mean, I think that uh, it's difficult. It's difficult to say because everybody's in different positions in life,
Hmm.
and most people are afraid to go out on a limb and say, you know what, this isn't right. This is not what I believe in, and stand up for it because they have a job and a family that they've got to try to feed and support, and they don't have the option to do that. I think people like you and I are a little bit different where we have the ability to do that, and I think as that, you know, I think we have a duty to do that, let's say.
Sure.
And I think that's part of why you and I are having these conversations is because we feel duty bound to try to make things better because we see what's wrong and we have the ability and the knowledge to do so.
Right. Well, and that's kind of why, like, I was looking at the, like, what is the conservative position on homosexuality? Because it is, like, I look at it, I'm like, well, from a Christian perspective, which let's assume that for the sake of argument, let's assume that is the core of conservatism, which is kind of true these days. Um, it's clearly a sin, right? It's not something you should be doing, is to err. But of course, we're all sinners, right?
Right.
And I think there's probably better ways to work forward from that instead of working backwards. It's like, we cross the line and keep pushing that backwards, we'll probably overstep it. And so I think if we find a point where we rebuild that and basically just say, you know, what is our tolerance of homosexuality? What should they be a part of and what shouldn't? Like what like obviously if you're known to be very greedy, maybe we don't put you in charge of handling the church's money, for instance, and give you a blank ability to manage the funds of the community, basically. If you gamble it or you're not good with money. So what is the equivalent with somebody who is, who's just gay? Do we say they can't teach? That feels wrong. But probably they shouldn't be educating children about certain topics.
Well, I mean, and yeah, you're talking about some sketchy stuff there because you're seeing that right now, right? Like where you have math teachers that are indoctrinating children using this
This
kind of
is
stuff, and
right.
like it's essentially like the reason I'm bringing that up is because of what you said as far as like, hey, we allow them to teach this, and okay, but they're teaching other things. I think a lot of it requires parents to get involved and
Sure.
they have to be involved in their kids' lives. If you if they were, had they been over the last, I don't know, 30 years, 40 years, you wouldn't have what you have right now. Like that wouldn't be a thing because there are too many parents, I think, that would look at it and say, what do you, why is this a thing? You shouldn't be talking about that. That's not
Right.
okay.
Well,
And they would have shut it down immediately.
and it's kind of implicit in my argument is that, like, a math teacher talking about these sort of the dildos and butt plugs is easily stopped if you pay attention. Like that is like no, just stop that immediately. Not hard to tell that they are deviating from math to get there. Um, but if like you don't have to pay close attention to stop that. Like, that shouldn't be something that it is a difficult thing to stop a math teacher from talking about. Now, if you say have somebody teaching reproductive anatomy to kids, and that's the topic of the course, you're going to have to pay a little bit closer attention to stop them from talking about those topics.
Sure.
Because to some extent, there is an aspect of it where that may come up and they may need to address it and have an answer.
Right. But I mean, like, they don't teach that to, like, that's a high
Right.
school level class, right? Like, that's actually
Absolutely.
usually, I think, a junior or senior level class even.
Sure.
And I think that there's, while that's a reasonable thing, like I think it actually goes to a broader systemic thing where people have to realize they have to decide that it's not okay. They have to be willing to sacrifice something in order
And it,
to in
sure.
order to save their children.
And that is one of the reasons why I'm broaching this topic is because I think if if we're clear on specific purpose details where the lines are, it can empower people to stand up as we approach the line, basically, because they know where the line is. If they don't know where the line is, then it's harder to I'd say it's harder to stand up. It's harder to have that conviction.
Well, so I would say the problem is that I don't know if there is a line. I don't know that there
Well,
is a given line. I don't know that the Republican side, conservatives, whatever, has a line in place. We could come up with one, but it would be based on our personal moral,
well,
guidance.
yeah, that's basically what I'm saying is as conservatives, where do we think the line should be?
Look, don't label me with that shit. I'm not a conservative.
I mean, you're probably not Republican, but socially, you're very conservative.
Oh, I very conservative. I wouldn't even call myself a conservative. I'd call myself a traditionalist. So where I would draw the line, nobody'd go to.
That's where would you draw the line? I'm curious.
Where would I draw the line? It's not allowed in polite society.
Homosexuality isn't allowed in polite society.
Yeah.
What does that mean? It means out in public, you shouldn't be able to tell that they're homosexual at all.
Something of that nature. Yeah.
Okay. Um,
And to be fair, I also am not a huge, like, I'm not a fan of PDA for straight couples either,
no, I
right?
yeah, I imagine this is a just a level of sexuality shown in public that you're
Right.
against. That shouldn't be immediately clear that someone is straight either.
Right.
Um, yeah, sure, that makes sense. I'm inclined to agree. Um,
Like if everybody keeps their own like sexual proclivities to themselves, this becomes a non-issue. Like here's the deal, you're like I'm not gonna share my, that I'm straight in public with everybody where I'm, you know, fawning all over people or making out with somebody in the hallway or whatever that is, right? Whatever that PDA looks like.
yeah,
And like but that goes for everyone, not just not
yeah.
not just
No,
it's
I'm,
not
I'm,
one way.
I'm mulling over the implications of it because the next thought
The
is
argument is going to be holding hands in public.
the argue that is what people are debating over.
That's what it's going to be. They'll be like,
It's
oh,
the-
so we can't even hold hands in public. That's like I've heard that argument before 20 years ago.
like, we can negotiate that as your response. We might
Well,
be
I
able
mean,
to tolerate that,
I would
maybe.
say, if you want to hold hands in public, that's fine. There are a lot of places in the US is kind of weird about that kind of stuff, but there are a lot of places in the world that it's not strange for two men or two women to hold hands while walking down the street. Like we could make holding hands with other people, other individuals, a socially accepted practice, like as just
Yeah.
human beings, and I'm okay with that.
Where is it socially acceptable for men to do that?
Uh, let's stay on topic.
Okay.
There's
I'm curious, but
well, I mean, from what I understand, like it's fairly normal in and accepted in Europe or even in the Middle East, even in like
okay.
Islamic countries, like because it's not seen as a sexual thing. That's the
Yeah.
big
No,
deal. Like it's not seen that way.
it's just it feels like an odd gesture for two men, but
Right, but
that's a whole different
that's from an American perspective, right?
perhaps. I mean, it's a whole thing of like gender roles and anyway. That's a whole different discussion.
So you're saying that you don't hold hands with your buddy and skip through the park with him? What
Hey,
kind of
look, that was
monster are
one
you?
time and they said they deleted that video. Okay.
It was in college and it doesn't count, right?
Something like that. It was a bit. They were
Well,
using a dare. No.
I was
No, it's
drunk. You
just
made me do it.
um No, I just,
and off the rails. That's always good.
yeah. No, I'm still kind of trying to figure out if like going back that far, I feel like you're the amount of social guide rails you now have. I'm trying to think if marriage would even be, man, that'd be so radically different. It'd be so hard to get there though. Um,
Yes, your
yeah,
terms are
okay.
acceptable.
I don't mind it. Like that
Yeah.
sounds like a good world to live in. Back to, where it's, you know, the like I don't really see a strong reason. Like, what is the value of all this sexualization in culture right now?
Gain anything?
Like,
Nothing.
I don't see any value to it. It
And
has only a negative impact on my life on that.
I have an interesting thought. So we were talking earlier about like having the having marriages recognized, right? And so I think you may be right on that. I think that might be a good road to go down. And here's the deal, like, because a lot of people who are, let's say, like, agnostic,
Right.
right, non-religious, they'd be like, well, how do I get married, right? Well, in reality, I would say that my argument would be, if you just want to get married in the eyes of the state, fine, and
The
but
state can have a contract. Yeah.
you follow the state's laws based on
Right.
your contract. Because I mean, if you go to the JP and get married, I don't think you take vows and just and do any of that. My understanding is like, hey, we're getting married, and you fill out a paperwork and you hand
You
it over.
basically you vowed to be married.
I don't even think you
Yeah.
vow. You don't even do that. Like you just say, yes, we're married now, but that means that you follow their contract. I think
Yeah. I mean, I say
whatever,
vows. I mean, you basically restate that you're entering into the contract. But yeah.
right. But I think like, yeah, I think you should be bound by whatever, I'm trying to think of how to put it, whatever religion you decide to, whatever religion's rules you decide to get married into, right? So if you get like, and you can list that on your marriage certificate and say, we were married Baptist, Catholic, whatever, something you're going to have to agree to ahead of time,
Yes.
right? And so
Yes.
now you know what the rules are, and the state is not involved in those marriage. If you're married,
Should it question for you?
hang on, let me
Should even
finish.
okay.
Hang on. The state is not involved in those marriages. The state merely recognizes that they exist. So
Yeah.
that you have the benefits of saying, hey, we're married, and so if you get tax benefits from it or whatever, all of those things, but things with regard to marriage, the way that the interactions go, the way that, all of that is all decided within the church, period. Done.
Yes. Yes. I'm kind of want to take it a step further and say only the state cannot marry you. You can only enter into a civil union,
Yeah, I mean, you could change that language. Sure.
basically, because I think marriage needs to have a much deeper aspect of social, if not spiritual promise.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Like
So,
a marriage occurs inside the church,
right.
right? And
It's
if you
automatically
just want to,
recognized as a civil union as
and
well.
yeah, and the state just recognizes that civil union, but they also understand that they're subjugated to the rules of that church.
Yes.
They can only enforce within what those rules of that church are. Um,
It
Now
also
there might have to be
institutionalizes the
some
concept of a church. Kind of like it.
true, but the other thing that you have to look at is you're going to have to set some overreaching, like some overarching kind of umbrella boundaries that the church is not allowed to uh, infringe on, let's say.
Like, what are you thinking
Because
of?
otherwise you'll end up where you have um, any of your other um, any of the other odd things that you're talking about, like polygamy, for instance.
Hmm.
Well, that's acceptable in some churches.
Is there a
So
social reason the state shouldn't recognize that then?
I
Or
don't know.
is there a reason the state shouldn't recognize that?
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I,
That's a question that you'd have to figure out, because you'd have, I mean, you'll have stuff like that, and then you have stuff like in some, I'm not going to say all of Islam, but some sects of Islam that women have zero rights, right? And I mean, I don't know how I argue and say, well, you know, if you in now part of it, I think you have to enter into the marriage of your own volition,
yes.
right? And if you
Yes.
do that, how do I argue that you need to have some sort of
I was
different
gonna,
rules if you chose to do that? I'm like,
I mean, and I think that was gonna be my question is like, is there a limit to what rights you can voluntarily give up?
I don't know.
I mean, because there's some fair questions of like, at a certain point, the likelihood that you're actually doing it on your own volition is low, and perhaps there's undetected um uh
I mean, there's a lot of social pressure, right?
right.
Especially in certain communities, not necessarily just Islam, but in several other communities where there's a lot of social pressure that you need to get married, or like arranged marriages. I know that's a big thing, or historically was a big thing in India,
Sure, but
right? And so
social
in
pressure is not always a bad thing either.
n- no, but it can lead to issues with people not making informed decisions on their own basis, and that's my concern, right? I think
No,
social
I
pressure is fine, but if they're not being able to make independent judgments and decisions that they feel like are best for them, then I don't know that that's okay.
no, I agree. It's more of a how do you detect that sort of a thing.
It
And
would be difficult if
and
possible at all.
yeah, and that's why I look at all this stuff. I'm like, there is the coercive aspect of it. There's maybe some practical aspects where you get to a point where it's clearly too it's this is too much stuff that you're giving up, and it's very likely you're being coerced to do this. So maybe we should stop it. I don't know, but I don't really have an answer on that.
Yeah, I mean,
But I think that
you
kind
can
of
argue that, but you could also argue like, hey, if you've got a guy that's worth, say, half a million or half $1 billion, right? He's got $500 million sitting in the bank on
yeah.
top of anything else. Like, and somebody decides, you know what? I want to, like, some girl decides she wants to be with him, knowing that he's married and
Hmm.
that she gets nothing. Like, and she agrees to that, and he says, look, you can like we can enter into another marriage, but like this is my first wife. She gets everything. You get nothing, nothing. And that woman says, you know, I get that, and that sucks, but I'll have a better life
No,
for me and any children that I bear
and
by entering into that. Like, it's hard to, I mean, like, that's another one that you like. How do you argue it? Like,
no, I agree. There's
they
all sorts
basically
of
give up rights to everything in
there's
order to,
things like I would never want to give up my rights for that, but I could see that other people would.
right.
But no, I think we've about covered that. It's an interesting. I kind of like that whole idea of let's democratize the rules in which you can bind yourself in marriage, or at least decentralize it or whatever. I think it'd be an interesting.
Right. Yeah, I
So
mean, it would, you know, it would push the church back into the forefront. It would give them, you know, the only concern that I have is it would give some of them more power that they don't need or deserve.
but
But
it'd be
at the
market
same,
regulated.
right, it's a free market. It's a free
Right.
market economy is what it is. You can do
You
whatever
could,
you want to. You make the choice that you want to make. If you don't like that church, you can go get married in a different church. And like you have a very strict set of bounds of what you can do,
right.
right?
Yeah. No, I like it.